Welcome once again to the Biz Breaks Podcast. I am your host, Kevin the Credit Crusher, along with my co-host and the beautiful Nykeia Neal, the financial expert. And today we have a great guest on. All of our guests are special. This one proves to be just as, if not more, special than all. So, Stephon, we're going to talk to you about what makes you so special. You've certainly been a guiding light for me in my journey through entrepreneurship, and we're going to get into it. But before we do, I just want to make sure everybody goes and like, follow, subscribe, and share. We want you to like, follow, share, and subscribe on all of our platforms. And let me put this up here real quick. Just in case you guys didn't hear it, you can see it. Go ahead and like, follow, share, and subscribe on all of our social media platforms. So, Stephon, you tell us who you are, why you are, how you are, and how you got to be.
Sure, absolutely. So first, thanks so much, Kevin and Nykeia, for having me on here. It's a pleasure. And so for everyone at home or at work or wherever you may be, my name is Stephon Braithwaite Martin. I'm the founder and lead consultant at Rhetoric Advising. I am a business management consultant. So I help folks start, grow, and market fantastic businesses. And I've been doing this for about 6 years. 6 years? Yeah, it's been 6 years. So I've been doing this for 6 years, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to work with so many folks and help them grow. So let's talk about the ways that I do that. Primarily, I work with new entrepreneurs and folks who are getting their articles of incorporation or articles filing articles and getting their LLCs and corporations, S corps, things like that. But where our bread and butter is building out business marketing and business management strategies. So if you're bringing a product to market or a service and you're trying to think of how do I get in front of the right folks? How do I price myself accordingly? How do I scale this business and turn this into something that's even bigger than what I've imagined? That's really where we live at, that marketing and sales strategy piece. So that's what I do, how I am. I'm feeling fantastic. It's a nice day out here in the DMV. So it's about 68 degrees. I don't know how it is over in Philly, but it's hot. Well, it's 68 degrees and sunny. Oh, it's cold. Yeah, it's a nice day. It's been a confusing week of weather because it was like 99 degrees and then it was cold and then it was rainy and then it was, I don't know, but can't complain much. It's been a fantastic ride. But yeah, happy to be here.
We can blame global warming on that. Now, blaming and finding a solution are two different things, and I think we are in a group of people who are working to find solutions to all of life's problems. So my solution is less plastic. So I do my part to not contribute to the landfill issue, which is causing some of the ozone layer issues. That's what I'm going to do.
Kevin, I'm with you on that. I like to recycle. It like hurts my heart when I go somewhere. It's not like I can't put something in a recycle bin, or I'm at home like that weird person that's like about to close the trash. I'm like, it's a bottle in here. Who didn't put this in it? Right. I'm that crazy lady a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Got to do your
out here, we don't even have. I'm sure this is coming to you guys. I think Jersey just passed this, but there's no plastic bags out here. Plastic bags, even styrofoam containers, they come in these like biodegradable containers. There are no like styrofoam containers, and we recycle as well. So I try to do my part as well and try not to get things that I know I'm not going to use.
Yep.
So yeah.
So I just
go ahead.
So you talked. I'm asking you this too because I just had a meeting with two awesome real estate agents who are looking to actually grow and scale their business. They're new. I would say this last year they sold about 26 properties, which is great. Their first year. And they were asking about working with someone to help them with their business, with their business management and having that business plan together. So do you work with real estate agents as well? Because there are real estate agents actually recruiting other agents as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, with real estate agents, is interesting because real estate is an industry that, and how do I put this mildly? They suck at marketing. They're awful at it. And so, the real estate industry, while you can run up a lot of money, especially when you're starting to do volume. So if you're doing 26 properties and we're averaging, let's say, I'm gonna say on the low side, $200,000 property, you're looking at over $5 million in volume, right? So they're doing good money. The way to scale it, though, and where a lot of real estate agencies fall short, is when they start recruiting these other real estate agents and they become like the broker owner, broker manager. They sort of hang them out to dry of they only eat what they kill, right? They only are able they're only able to, figure out it all on their own. And then the brokers left to receive the cut off the top. And what's starting to differentiate successful brokerages from the ones that just have people who, were working at FedEx and wanted to go into real estate is, what processes do you have in place to help your real estate agents become better marketers themselves, right? What are you doing in-house to help folks create a steady stream or steady funnel of clients without having to putting up a little flyer in the CVS on the cash wrap, right? So how can you get into the lives of your customers? So I work with real estate professionals on how to be able to build that in ways that are impactful, and not just the listing, putting the listing and then putting that it was sold. There's other more impactful ways to get to folks, especially in this market. It's super important as the market is starting to turn.
So, Stephon, what is the state of Black business? I know you're working with a lot of businesses, but what's the state of Black business today?
That's a fantastic question. Black business is the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurship in the United States, right? And part of it is that there is this wave of wanting to claim generational wealth, which is important, and I think it does have its space. And this wave of people wanting to be able to be direct stakeholders in their own future. What that comes with, however, is there are folks who are trying to move fast but not far. So some folks are jumping into the game and looking at people who have been able to succeed and scale quickly and think that that's the template for how they should be growing their business. And unfortunately, some folks end up going a little too far from the shore before learning the mechanics of swimming, if that makes sense. Right? So you watch a Michael Phelps and then you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna jump in the pool. I'm gonna do that right now. And then, it don't really go as well, right? You're not winning no medals. So the state is that people are growing, people are moving, and there actually an influx of dollars to support Black and minority owned businesses. The thing is, and this is going to be sort of the theme during the conversation, it's marketed horribly. So in the DMV right now, and in Philly as well, because those are the two that I tend to study the most. In DC specifically, there's about, I think, $8 million in cash right now, just sitting in free money for not just minority business owners, but they're allocating a big chunk of that to minority business owners and small business owners in the city of District of Columbia. In Philly, there's about $4 million that I know of that's sort of just floating around in a variety of different grants and different city-funded programs. But again, it's just very difficult to get tapped into those things because those a lot of these business owners, especially Black business owners, are people who are leveraging that with their careers, with their children, with all the other responsibilities that they have. So it's difficult, but it's growing.
Stephon, so let's stay there. How much of that is real? And let me tell you where that question comes from. I have been dealing with my business and other businesses for quite some time, right? And there are always these set-asides, but it seems like they'll tell you that they exist. They may even give you some access to go get them, but there's always some reason why you can't get them, right? And I know for a fact that there are some discriminatory practices that are happening, right? I know politically you have to say that you set this aside for small businesses, Black businesses, women-owned businesses, but then you disqualify businesses because of the industry they're in, like mine, or you disqualify these businesses because they don't have the right number of employees, and the monies that they're trying to get are going to help them get to the place that you're trying to service. So when you say these monies are set aside, how much of that is real and how much of that is smoke?
So I think there is still, even if I'll put it like this, there is a significant amount of smoke, right? But significant is like 30%.
Okay.
Right? Like if I sold something for 30% off, that's a significant reduction, right?
Yeah.
So it's a significant amount of smoke, but that still means that the lion's share of opportunity is still there. But again, the issue is that it's marketed so horribly, and it's because a lot of these funds get allocated to state and municipal departments, small community organizations, things like that don't have the, for lack of better words, oomph to be able to put this stuff out there, right? And a lot of these things get funded by major banks who have tons of millions of dollars in marketing, but won't market it. So, for example, if I'm a big box bank, and when I'm talking about the TDs, the JP Morgans, all those places, JP Morgan actually does have some grant opportunities, and they're actually investing a lot of dollars in it. And there's some receipts that show that they're actually like highlighting these businesses and giving them the opportunities. But what most of these big box brands do is they don't really want to spend the money on R&D to find these businesses, and they're just now realizing that they're really bad at helping Black folks out. Right? After 150 years of like actively working against them, they're realizing that they don't know how to do the opposite. So what they do is they'll basically write a check to a lot of other organizations, a lot of local nonprofits and things like that, to be able to then go ahead and fund these other businesses in the area. Issue is these small, while impactful nonprofits don't really have the marketing acumen to really put the things out there. And we don't know to look for them because we're not going to see it in the newspaper, or we're not going to see it on social because they don't really have a big following, and we're not really going to see it on CNN because that's not really what they would cover. So it becomes a little difficult to like run into these things. You end up like stumbling onto them in happenstance. Then we get to the next level of issue, which is the fine print, right? So there's money allocated to these things, but now they need you to have a business plan. Right? Suddenly you're like, okay, well, I've been waiting for an opportunity, but you didn't actually have, and I'm not talking about you, Kevin, but a business owner may not have already had a formalized business plan as to how they're going to enter the market, how they're doing their thing. You know, if I am a mechanic and I've just been mechanicking for 5 or 6 years, right? Now that somebody is like, look, I got $10,000 for you to purchase some equipment, or I got $50,000 for you to put down on a new facility, give me the plan. They're gonna be like, well, I work with my hands. That's what I do. So it becomes an issue then for you to like waltz in and ask for more money, because now we're asking you to like approach this as an academic rather than approaching this as like the person in the industry that you are. It's not just like I'm gonna interview you. I like your business. I believe in you. I'm gonna make it happen. You got to show me on paper. You got to show me tax returns. You got to show me the money, where the money's going. And those are things that, again, where people are jumping in and going too far, too fast, you don't actually have those things put together. So when people are asking you to produce paperwork, now you're not ready. Now you're not really able to make those things happen. So there is a good amount of what you're saying that is true. There is a lot of smoke and mirrors. There is a lot of posturing. There is a lot of people getting together and clapping and being so excited about this money that's not really going to go anywhere. But there is also a lot of folks where a lot of times where these business owners are not quite ready to get to the level. They want the money, but they don't actually have the plan together to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's us. Like, it's us, right? I talk to people all the time, and I tell people, if somebody gave you the $50,000 that you really wanted, would you know what to do with it? No. Show it to me on paper. And they're like, well, I'm gonna spend some money on marketing. Well, how much? And what marketing? They don't know. Where?
Right. Yeah. And it's insane. So I was just at a conference in DC about 2 weeks ago, and First of all, it was fantastic. And I'm going to talk about DC a lot, even though like most of my clients are in Philly. But I went to this conference, and first of all, the entire infrastructure of like a lot of our community small business development programs are Black women. And this is actually the case in a lot of metropolitan areas. The business development community is becoming more and more Black women making those things happen, which is fantastic for like 36 different reasons. But the interesting part about it is like, so we asked them, we were like, look, y'all are Black people. There's a whole bunch of Black people saying here, why are we not getting this money? And they were like, I'm gonna keep it real with you in a way that only a mom can. Y'all not ready. And so we were like, here's this high-powered person making good money, triple degreed up, master's degree in this, 2 bachelors in this, master's in public administration. What do you mean? And they were like, well, look, a lot of people aren't ready for the opportunities that they're asking for, because they're asking for the opportunities, but they're not also preparing themselves for said blessing when it comes around. So while we want to give you this money, and we'll even help you work on the application, if you're not in a space where you can, again, speak to with confidence what you are going to do with this money that we've either fundraised or comes from taxpayer dollars, whatever the case may be, because those folks, the people who are giving the money out, whatever organization is, if they want to raise the money again, they have to now go back and say, look, we gave Kevin $50,000. This is what Kevin did with that money. We give Kevin $50,000 and he blows it. Who's going to give this person money again?
Stephon, send me to the back. Show me to the, tell me where I can go. And I promise you, I'll show up ready.
All right. So what I can do is, so I'm actually working on a series of content right now on city and state grants. So I'm talking about just free money. I'm not talking about no loans. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. So I'm working on a list of grants that are available right now. And I'm going to try to keep it focused to the Northeast because there is some stuff that's like geographically specific. So sometimes it's like, okay, you have to have lived in Philly for 5 years. You have to have been from here, or you need to live on the East Coast, whatever. So I should have that ready to go by like Friday. So what I would say is, while you guys are like, following, and subscribing, follow me on on Instagram. So I am StephMart _CEO on Instagram. I'll drop that on there as well. But I will be posting this on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and all my other social channels as well. So I've been trying to collect these things because I get that a lot, right? Of, look, I'm ready to go. I just don't know where the money is at. And you are right. It is hard to find it. It's hard to peruse these sites. It's hard to get government contracts because sam.gov is annoying to get through. It's very difficult to do all of these things. It is, but it's also very possible. So I'm committed to make that happen, and hold me to that. I will start posting some stuff to share with folks to find these resources.
Okay.
Contact information after this.
Mm-hmm.
I can share the wealth. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yep.
You anxious to ask another question? Go ahead. What you got?
So two piece. One, are there industries that are more favorable for some of this money?
See, that's a very good question. So there are. It really depends. And with the economy sort of changing, it's going to depend even more. So a lot of this is sort of out there. I've seen things for example, I've seen things for BIPOC, so Black and Indigenous people of color, owned construction companies. I've seen things for companies in the beauty space. I've seen some financial services companies, but it wasn't specific to them. It just didn't exclude financial services because sometimes they do that. I've seen a wide variety of things, right? Some of them were like, look, we want service-based companies. So things that you're not selling physical products. Other times they're like, we do want product-based companies, and the money is going specifically to helping with inventory or helping you scale that out. There's also a variety of, and this is something that's free and a easy way to sort of get into it. If you start looking at business development centers in your city. So, for example, Kevin, I know that you're in the Goldman Sachs program, right? That's 10,000 small businesses. So, right. So there's things like that. And then there's also ones that are on like the local level. So it's not necessarily sponsored by a larger company, that there are classes, and those folks happen to be on the board of this other thing that happened to be in the Chamber of Commerce as to putting out a $10,000 grant that happens to know the person that's doing the grant making for another thing. So like, those are the ways, like the networking piece is also very important, because a lot of these folks do double duty, right? If I'm a business consultant, it stands to reason that I sit on the board for something, or it stands to reason that I'm also a decision maker on another thing that affects businesses, especially if I'm at a certain stature. So we also want to make sure that we're doing that as well.
CDFIs.
Mm-hmm.
You introduced me to the term CDFI.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. And now it has come up several times since our conversation, that introductory conversation.
Sure.
Can you tell the folks what a CDFI is? First of all, tell them what the acronym stands for.
Yeah, absolutely. So CDFI is a community development financial institution. And so I'm going to paint the picture really quickly. Like I said, these big box banks, right? And I won't name them again, but your biggest banks understand that they have a problem with being able to affect the community in positive ways. And so what they end up doing, right, whenever you see a bank say, we've committed $500 million to building up the community in a variety of ways, they are not just doing it themselves. What they're really doing is going to farm out the work and write checks to these other institutions to really make the impact happen. Because Chase can't do it themselves, right? But they're going to hire, they're going to reach out to a local bank or a local institution. Let's talk specifically to Philadelphia, right? They're going to look at, there's a bank called Community First Fund, which is a small, super small CDFI that is responsible for giving out SBA-backed loans and other sort of like community-backed loans. So they're more willing to meet with an entrepreneur with a business plan and give them some money, right? There is the Enterprise Center that offers some loan opportunities, some grant opportunities, partially funded by these larger banks. So CDFIs are the smaller banks and other nonprofit institutions that are specifically catered to helping entrepreneurs in low and medium income communities build and scale their businesses. Sometimes they offer classes, sometimes they offer smaller loans, and they have more flexible loan terms. So now you don't need a 740 credit score to be able to get your first, $10,000 loan. In part of the process, they will look at the business plan and look at the financials. And maybe you haven't made a single dollar yet, but you have a very solid plan as to what it is. You stand a fighting chance rather than walking into a TD Bank and asking for a $50,000 loan with no business, right? So they will work with you on these things and have more flexible terms. I've seen some CDFIs work with folks at like the 600 credit score range. So there are some places that allow you to do so. The way to locate them, if you literally type in Philadelphia CDFIs, you'll start to find a list of folks that have it there. It'll take you right to their website. It says it on there that they're a certified community development financial institution, but that's the same for any city, any state. Usually you have to do it by state on the state level, and just type in PA or Delaware or Vermont CDFIs, and you'll be able to find those.
Nice. You hear that? This money. Steph, the difficulty that I have found with many of the businesses is the non-traditional component. So barbershops, hair salons, my company. Let me give what's another example of a non-traditional, maybe an artist, right? Who's developing, or a musician, right?
Yep.
Those are non-traditional industries, and as such, it makes it difficult to get funding. Where do companies like that go to get access to some of this money and some of these resources? Because it's not just about money. Sometimes it's about management resources such as yours.
Absolutely. So there's there are a couple of pieces of advice I have for my non-traditional companies, right? The first thing is that even though you're non-traditional, do not cling to this sort of, I'm non-traditional, I do things differently, therefore I have no standard business practices. Because I see that a lot with, like, for example, a barbershop, right? I take cash, that's how I take it. I just take cash, I pay what I pay, I do what I need to do. That's all well and good until you got to convince somebody to give you their money, right? So one thing I always talk about with our solopreneurs, right? So our barbers, our salon owners, our musicians, or even if you have more of an enterprise, right? So you own the barber shop and you have folks in the shop, start running payroll, right? Restructure the practices so that the money gets paid to the house, and then you are able to pay folks out based on how many heads they saw, how many hours they worked, whatever the case may be. It is less complicated and less expensive than it sounds, right? Running QuickBooks is not super expensive. Running paychecks is not super expensive. So there are ways to be able to do that, pay the taxes you need to pay, and have a more accurate account for how much money you are bringing in year over year. That's the number one obstacle, more than anything else. That is the number one obstacle to non-traditional businesses getting funded, because there's an over-reliance on cash, which is one. And two, people can't really put a finger on how much money they're making, what their P&L looks like, things like that. So it's like, well, we aren't confident that this is going to make sense, right? That's both for loans and grants. Now, there are some more industry-specific things, right? So the cannabis industry is still very difficult to get funding in right now, because even though it's been decriminalized, a lot of financial institutions won't touch it. And the reason why they won't touch it is because of the Fed's anti-money laundering standards. So basically, it is a huge, and I want to make this very, very clear, because there's two elements at play. One is the very obvious. They're only choosing these really large venture-funded cannabis companies to be able to do this stuff with. And FYI, those people are getting caught up in money laundering cases right now. That's happening right now. And like these big, large venture-funded companies are getting caught up in money laundering schemes right now. But
wait,
also,
y'all watch Billions?
I have not.
I started and I trailed off because I want to binge watch it. But go on, you were about to say something.
Because that came from that. I just wanted to just say that they were talking about that there too. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, it happens, and yeah. So
what's his Axe? Is his name the main character?
Yeah, Axe Capital. But no, it's a good show to watch. It really talks about money, how the world works with that, and how everything is connected with it. That sometimes we don't think about. But go ahead.
And so, like, the wildest thing is, and just as like a quick sort of like sidebar, is there are so many folks that basically people think that rich people are immune from like doing illegal things. They just do it at scale, right? And have better attorneys. That's the only difference. Like there is not a single crime that happens on the like the regular people or like below poverty line level that rich folks are not currently doing. That's my plug for today. I've seen it with my own eyes.
We're not advocating criminal behavior, people.
We're not advocating criminal behavior. I'm just saying there is no change in morality with the more money you make. It makes you more of who you are, right? So there is that. But when it comes to AML laws, banks get hit really hard if they fund a business that ends up getting tied up in something later on. So if you have a cannabis company or whatever company, and it turns out that they got caught up in a money laundering ring, while the company gets, held accountable and people might go to jail or whatever, the bank gets fined millions of dollars for facilitating that, even if it was just a mistake. So because of this, they're very stingy with money in certain industries, particularly if they're not established businesses, and they'll sort of move the goalposts on what it means to be established for, again, various reasons. So it's a little difficult. But for industries like that, they're a little harder to find. But if you're in like the cannabis industry, for example, there are cannabis-based grants, and that are really catered to that, where you don't really have to go through the same level of like vigilance to be able to get it. A good person to follow for that actually is on Instagram is Cannabis Noir. So Noire. She's actually Philly based, but she has a lot of fantastic business acumen and really knows like the cannabis business development industry. So that's somebody to follow there. For your industry, Kevin, I think you can go more on the grant side. There are some ways for you to sort of approach it a little differently, and because traditional banks just aren't going to be the answer for credit counseling and things like that, because there's too many bad examples of it, and you're going about it the right way. So I think going the way of the grants and smaller applications and giving yourself an opportunity to showcase the business and how you operate and what actually happens behind the scenes, and pulling back that curtain gives you a much better chance than going with somebody that's a bank that's more heavily regulated, because they're not gonna want to budge.
Yeah, so we need to talk offline about that, because that's certainly, there are two things. One, there have been a lot of bad players in my industry, but on top of that, our work is in direct contrast to what the banks do, right? They don't make money. If we're successful, banks lose money, right? So I understand why they are blacklisting us. So that grant situation, but it seems, Stephon, that you can't just Google grants for credit counseling agencies and something come up. I tried. Trust and believe me. That keyword string that I just gave you, nothing comes up.
Right. You can't really Google. That's the thing. You can't really Google grants for any insert niche hair industry, right? Because nobody's thinking to sit down and hire a paid ads person to optimize their SEO for you to find it in a Google search, right? So it's like you've really got to start to get creative and dive into that network of like, where are these things coming from? And that's part of the reason why, like, as I started to encounter this information, I realized like how valuable it really is to folks. And even if like nobody in my immediate network applies or gets it immediately, right? If it gets shared out and more folks are able to see it, and somebody ultimately gets some money and keeps their business afloat for 3 more months, or gets the startup capital they need to scale something, I'm more than happy with it. So that's why I've sort of undertaken this research phase.
So are you working with the CDFIs, the small community-based institutions, to say, hey, you've got to approach your grant giving the same way you're asking the business owner to approach their business, right? Like I have to invest in SEO so my clients can find me, right? I am your client, and I would imagine, and stay with me here, I would imagine that you are judged based on, if I'm giving out a grant, right? Particularly if it's federally or even state government funded, right? Whether the organization gets another grant next year is dependent upon how many people they service and help, right? And the impact. So if I'm not getting the money to a business, and that money's not reporting back that I 10x'd my business because I got that money from the CDFI, right? Then next year when the CDFI says, give us 10 more times the money you gave us in 2022, the government says you've proven nothing. So it seems to me like they need to be motivated to market these things so that they can have a greater impact, so they can get more funding, so that they can get the ultimate goal, right, is for tax dollars. That's the government's stake in the game is for tax dollars, right?
So the logic follows, but there's 2 forces working against that. Businesses that have been able to secure this financing and have that secret sauce will do 2 things: start another business, or refer to somebody else that they know who is in that same sort of niche, right? So if I'm able to secure this grant, develop this relationship with a CDFI or whatever the case may be, and my homeboy who does similar business with me, we've done business before, I can tell them what they need to be able to go to that CDFI. Now they can go get the money, right? And they can ask for larger amounts. So the competition is small. The money's gonna get spent, right? And it's gonna go to where it needs to go. The real issue is, while it is ideal to get as many different hands into this so that we can all scale it and it can work for everybody, is that if you don't know about it, but I do, right, and I know somebody else who might need it, I can start making that happen, right? So that sort of referral basis becomes much stronger in its place. The money is going to get spent. It has to, because they won't get it again if they don't spend it, right? And really, they won't really be evaluated on their success for another 5 to 6 years. But that's really when it becomes winning time for businesses, right? I'd give you $100,000 today, but you turning that into $1 million next year doesn't really mean anything if you're out of business by year 5 when you try to scale it. You see what I'm saying? Right. So they have some time to sort of spend the money and then see what happens after the fact. So yes, while you're right, it would behoove them to be better at marketing. And I've had this conversation, and a lot of them sort of just like, it's out of our hands, we don't know, the money's going to get spent because the folks who are able to tap in are the ones that are able to tap in more than once, right? There is no like, oh, if you got grant money before, you can't get it again. You can apply every single time that you're eligible for it and get it over and over again. So,
Nykeia Neal, I'm monopolizing this conversation. Anything you want to ask?
No, it's okay. I see your brain over there working, and you like, I'm gonna get the people the information. How am I gonna? I like to know, how did you get into, because this show is about entrepreneurship and sometimes the trials, tribulations, and things like that comes along with this. So tell us your journey. Like, how did you get into this business? Like, what made you decide that this was it for you, or what's your story on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've always been entrepreneurial, right? So, my first sort of entrepreneurial venture, and I didn't even realize that was a venture, and I've talked about this before, was when I was in high school, like, my parents didn't have a lot of money, right? We lived in Brooklyn, which is expensive as is, and we weren't rich, so it was tough, right? So if I got $10 or $15 a week, maybe, I had to make that stretch, right? Whenever my parents remembered to give me $20 bills when I had allowance, that's what I did. So I had to make it work. I had to make it stretch. I'm somebody that never liked to ask for anything, right? I don't ask for money. I don't ask for gifts. So I had to find legal ways to be able to make this happen. So one of the first things I did was the high school I went to was huge, right? It had 4,000 kids in it at that time. It's like 6,000 now. It's a massive high school.
What school?
Brooklyn Technical High School. Right. So it's a specialized high school in New York. So 30,000 kids apply, 1,000 kids get in. Like, so it's very specialized, but it's also huge. It's the mathematics doesn't make sense to me, but I had a locker, and I just never could figure out how to make my locker situation work. So I got a locker, and the only locker I was able to get was like out of my way for my classes. Right. I had that class first period, but for the rest of the day, I was never near that side of the school. So if I had to go there at any point, I was late for whatever class I was going to. So the locker would stay empty. And I had a few friends who they either lost their locks or didn't want to ask their parents to buy a lock to get a locker. And you had to use particular kinds of locks, so they were kind of expensive. And so what I started doing was like, look, 50 cents a day, 25 cents a day, you can put your stuff in my locker. Just meet me after school. I'll get your stuff out. And we'd be cool. I did it with 3 friends. I had enough money to buy Chinese on Fridays. And so that was like sort of the first hustle. The other thing was one day, I think a friend, and this is something that I haven't shared before. So I'm sitting in class one day, and a friend had, he was not at school the day before, right? I don't know if he was actually sick or not. I don't know. But he wasn't at school the day before.
You know he wasn't sick.
I can't speak to that. Right. And so he was like, so I think this particular teacher was very strict. Right. And if you missed a day of class, they needed a parent note. They needed it fast. They might even call the parent and see what it was. Right. Because my mom's a teacher, I have really neat print and cursive handwriting. So my mom, I had to do homework over if my handwriting wasn't right. So I had very neat handwriting. So he was like, yo, bro, can you write this parent note for me. And so I was like, all right, I guess I could whip something up. So I was like, to whom it may concern, please excuse for his absence yesterday as he was feeling under the weather. I will have him make up any homework or classwork missed. Please feel free to call me at the guy's phone number. Respectfully yours. Embellish the signature, put it together. It worked. He was like, yo, bro, I got like $5 for you. I was like,
You do know in business today, that's called mail fraud. Federal offense. But the statute of limitations is up, so you cannot incriminate yourself now.
And I was like 14, so like if you
minor
pull up if you want.
And
first offense. Don't act like you ain't never signed some names or whatever. I know I did.
I never admitted on camera.
Lived in California. I learned how to do his signature, so it's close to mine. So when I was late, I would sign his name. They didn't know he lived in California. He ain't signed it this morning because he was late because he got off work. I made up a whole job they didn't even have. So I could.
I was never admitted on camera, folks.
So I wrote those. I also tutored. So I used to write like essays and poems competitively. So I was in the spoken word circuit for a while or whatever. And in high school, folks who were like struggling with like Regents essays and things like that, I would work with them to be able to like enhance what they were doing. So I got paid for it, and I totally undercharged because I just wanted enough money to like do the things I wanted to do without having to ask my parents. So if I wanted to hang out on the weekend, I could just go do it. And I had my ex-girlfriend at the time. I threw her like a birthday party at a restaurant my senior year of high school. It wasn't that crazy, but it was cool. And it was the first time I realized that people show up to things, eat food, and don't pay. And I factored that in. So like I had some money, like some other people were like pitching in, but I like factored in like, hey, people might not pay for themselves. So I had a little extra money to like do my thing. So that was my first foray into that. But that aside, my first time really getting into what is now rhetoric advising is about a year and a half after I graduated. So I taught for a short period of time in Houston. And then I was in New York for a while and then came to Philly. And while I was sort of transitioning between jobs, I had been tutoring. So I had taught U.S. history because I was a poli-sci major. And I also was consulting sort of like a public speaking engagement. So if you were doing a presentation, a business pitch, or whatever the case may be, and I had been doing this since college, if you were doing those things, I would sit with you, look at the slides that you were doing, coach your speaking presence, coach the content of the work. And so in college, I was working with like local entrepreneurs at like 19, 20 and helping them tweak their business pitches to really deliver for, whatever investor or wherever they were at, right? College professors, entrepreneurs, students. That's what I was doing. So in Philadelphia, I had been doing this for a little bit. And I worked with this one guy that was working on his master's degree, right? So he was a business professional and he worked in the corporate world somewhere. And he was doing his capstone project. So he had to do like a 20-minute speech and do all this thing. It sucked. So he presented it. And the thing was, he was just so busy that he didn't have the time and the energy to really put into this project. And so I was like, look, man, I'll sit with you. Let's make this work. So I helped him build it out. And I presented him a new set of slides. It was like, look, present this. This is going to be gold. You're going to be good, right? I was like, these are the things you want to focus on. These are the elements. Again, I don't have an MBA, right? I'm just like well-read, well-studied, and I try to implement it. He's the guy going for the MBA. He's like, oh, that's interesting. I should do that, right? So he presents it. He gets an A. And he's like, look, man, I love what you did. What I paid you isn't enough. I want you to come to this networking event I'm going to be at. Cool. I am, at the time, to set the stage, I'm 21 years old. 22. And so I throw on my best suit. And early that morning, I go into a Starbucks. Because I just moved, so I didn't have Wi-Fi yet. I go into a Starbucks, and I sit down on Canva, and I'm like, I got to have some business cards. So I put together a business card in like an hour and a half, send it to FedEx to print out, drive over to that FedEx. I overdrafted my account too because I had like $40 in the account. The business cards was like $60. So I had like 3 days to let it hit and try to figure it out. But I overdrafted the account. The networking event is in Radnor. So I drive over to Radnor. I go to the spot. And I'm like, hey, I'm with so-and-so. They're like, oh, he's not here. So I'm like, what you mean? He not like I'm here with him. And they were like, yeah, nah, he's not here, but you can stick around. And I showed up a little late, so they were doing like a tour of the space, right? And so here I am at 21 and like 3/4. I wasn't 22 yet, surrounded by these 30, 40, and 50-year-old plus professionals and entrepreneurs who are all looking at me like, what are you doing here, bro? And me being with these like really cheap, flimsy business cards. I ordered like 1,000 of the cheapest business cards I can get.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hi, I'm Stephon, Rhetoric Advising. Nice to meet you. And they're like, so what do you do? And at the time, it was communications consulting. It wasn't management consulting, where I was working with folks on writing more specifically, right? And communicating on business pitches and on reports and things like that. That was where my focus was. But then I quickly realized that that's actually management consulting, and it's a much more scalable model to help folks work on their messaging, work on marketing, and work on sales, which is what I've been working in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of the moment where Rhetoric Advising was born. It didn't have no LLC yet. That came later. But I really it was really trial by fire of like convincing these folks. And since then, continuing to convince these folks that, you know, what's been done before doesn't mean that it's actually right. It doesn't mean that it's adaptable. The market's, you know, constantly vacillates back and forth. And you need to be able to create a strategy that either can stand the test of time or things that can be tweaked over the course of time to be able to scale. So that's sort of a long form version of the moment that I started it. But it was when I was in that crowd of folks and being like, I did not prep for this. I was prepared to be introduced to people, but this is what I'm going to do today because I ain't got no money. I need to get to it. And so from then I landed my first client. From there, I landed, you know, second and third client. And there's been a variety of trials and tribulations that come along the way, right? One of the first things that became an issue was while I was mature for my age, I wasn't fully mature yet. And so there was things that I didn't quite understand about how to operate within a business, right? In terms of like structures that I hadn't quite worked out yet. There was also the fact that I had a meeting once and I did a pitch at a networking event. The owners of the space pulled me aside and they were like, hey, look, we want to meet you in our office. We want to talk. I'm like, bet. Let's have this conversation. They're like, look, we have this business. It's been struggling. We think you can help us scale it. This is what we want to do. This is the planning that we have. I say, okay, absolutely. We talk. They're like, look, we're having a board meeting Wednesday. We'd love for you to come, present some ideas, etc. I'm like, absolutely. As we're making small talk, he says something about his kids, right? He's like, yeah, I got to go pick up my kids, da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, do you have kids? And I was almost offended by the question, right? Because again, I was like 21, so I'm like, no. And I'm like, no, why? Like, ew.
He said, ew. And what do you think this is?
He was like, how old are you? And so I told him how old I was. I never got the address to that meeting. So that's one of the moments where I realized it was like, not only is it just like, okay, that's a maturity thing on my part, but it was also like, I'm going to have an uphill battle being younger than a lot of the folks that I give advice to, because they're literally paying me to tell them what to do, right? And a lot of people conflate age with experience, and that's not quite the case, right? There are a lot of folks who are very wise in doing the wrong thing. They have all this experience doing it the wrong way that they do that really well, but I don't make it good. So I had to learn how to both position my value beyond just, hey, I'm really good at this, but like, hey, look, this is what's going to do for you, right? This is not the number of experience I've had. These are the outcomes I've had. And so that's been one of the chief obstacles that I learned how to overcome, thankfully, very early on. So now that I don't have that problem anymore.
there's so much gold in that story, though. Like, it is. Just how you went through things. And I think, anybody listening to this can see how sometimes you kind of stumble into entrepreneurial, but you always had that spirit. Like, you always had that energy. I'm sure, Kev, you have stories. I have stories. But we look back in our past, like, I did some things that not knowing that it would lead me to where I am now. So I want to ask you now, how old are you?
I'm 28.
28.
28. 28. So now I don't have the, oh yeah, you 20, you 20 what? Right. Like 28 is like, all right, cool.
You have kids?
No, still.
Yeah.
I'm not as ill. It's not as ill. It's on the it's yeah. I'm at the state now where I'm like, I like kids. Kids are dope. And I've always liked kids. I just didn't want the responsibility of having kids at that time.
I had my first kid at 40, okay? I'm 43. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. Great experience. I have no desire to continue on and do it again. But it's great. But I get where you came from for that.
Yeah, I was just like, look, man, I love kids, but I also like having money. So, and I was like, I think while my reaction was extreme, I also knew that I was like, look, this is the responsibility that I want to be able to make sure I walk into this responsibility of sound mind and sober heart. Right. So it was like, okay, this is where I want to be at, and not like this just happened to me, but yeah, God bless parents. I look forward to becoming one someday. And shout out to that. I actually ran into him recently, and I don't think he remembered the actual interaction because it happened so long ago. But it was something I look back on and laugh, because I'm just like, maybe it could have been a big client, maybe it couldn't have, but it was a funny moment.
But the deal is, it's fortunate and unfortunate, right? It's fortunate because it shaped you, right? It said, okay, I know that I'm going to have this obstacle, so let me deal with it before it happens. And it's unfortunate that, of course, who knows what that would have led to, but obviously you're here for a reason. And so that's just perfectly fine. There's no accidents. There are no accidents in life.
Right.
So, Stephon, we do this thing we call a fast four. We're going to ask you 4 questions. We want you to answer pretty quickly.
Okay.
We can embellish on some of the answers, but want you to
rapid fire.
Quickly. By the way, did you note the word vacillate? Nice. He slid that one through. So Stephon, when we're on these conversations, everybody usually has at least one word that we take away, and we got to go back and Google, right? Vacillate.
And he mean me. I'm normally the one like.
No. She's that's not true. That's not true.
Kevin's a wordsmith that he normally drops some words that are on here. I'm like, that's a good one, Kevin. Write that down.
That's good. Because I love people who have command of the language. So there are different people. So Stephon, I've known you for some time, and what I know is, not only do you know the words, you know how to use them correctly. Some people know the words, some people don't know the words, which is fine. Some people know the words, they just don't know how to use them, which is usually my case, right? Or not don't know how to use them, aren't comfortable using them. I'm comfortable with about 27 words, and that's where I stay. Right. And then there's some people who know that the words exist, know how to use them, and are comfortable using them. And I know you to be somebody who's very comfortable with the language. Great command. So I applaud that. All right. So let's jump into the fast four.
Okay.
Book that's had a great impact on your life, either personal or professional.
Oof. So many. Yeah. I'll talk about the book I'm reading right now. That's actually really, really good. It's called Stories That Stick. Blanking on the author, but it's called Stories That Stick. And basically it's a professional storyteller turned marketer. And she talks about how the key to marketing is actually storytelling, and not in the fluffy way, but there's like some actual pragmatic ways to be doing this. And this is what I've been preaching since I was like 13 about, like, hey, tell this story. Yes, that's the cover. Tell your story, and that's going to sell more than the logic, more than the products, more than the pricing, more than anything else. Stop pricing things at like $2.99 and saying it used to be $100 and trying to sell. Tell the story. So yeah.
Stories that stick. Love it. Okay. tool or resource that you use that's very effective and helpful?
Wow. Here's an underrated one. It's called JSTOR. So JSTOR is, and for any of my academics, this is going to sound familiar. So JSTOR is actually a mobile, virtual like repository, right, of peer-reviewed journals. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to do research in, I know Nykeia, you're in, let's say financial planning, right? And you're trying to do some like actual research, hard data-backed things. JSTOR is a dope free tool for you to be able to pull articles and be like, look, 36% of such and such do this. Here's a project that we worked on. We tested this theory. We've done these things. So when you are trying to like close a client, or when you're trying to look at what the market is doing, you're able to see what the scholars in that industry are talking about without it being anything crazy. So it's JSTOR, and this is something that universities pay millions of dollars over the course of the year to have available to their students when they're doing research. Because of the pandemic, they have given everybody access to 100 articles for free per month. So you just log in and do that. You anytime you want to go down a rabbit hole and do some research, you'll be able to get it.
You use JSTOR. I'm paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for it, but it's very effective. All right. Mm-hmm. A challenge that you've had to overcome.
Wow.
Notable challenge.
Notable challenge.
You just outlined one, but give us another one.
Okay. One of the challenges that I've been working on is creating a scalable model for my business. So when I first started, I was doing way too much for too little, right? And I try to position my value as cost and not my value as the outcomes I can bring to the business owner, right? So I was trying to come in a cut below everybody else. I was trying to be the cheapest, the most accessible, all of those things. And all of those things worked against my favor because I was basically farming out my time and my energy for great value prices. And that's just not the way to be able to scale a business, because you're going to leave yourself overworked, underpaid, and way overstressed. So, yes.
Scale a business. All right. One thing you wish you'd learned earlier in life that would have helped you in your later life, even though you haven't got to your later life yet.
I'm in my later early life, but discipline beats talent every time. And so I'm somebody who, I was like the gifted and talented child all my elementary school life. So like I almost became addicted to not trying when I was a kid, right? So and there are some adults that do this now where they almost sabotage their success because they want to see how far they can go with the least amount of effort. And there's folks who would rather fail because they didn't try than try and fail, right? Like that doesn't compute in their head. Like I tried to do something and it still didn't work. That means I'm bad at it, and they can't sit in that, right? Because being bad at something is really a temporary thing, and you can work your way to it. So that would be it. It's just that the discipline will beat the talent, because eventually I got to a stage around 19, 20 when I was like interacting with professionals on a daily basis who I was smarter than them, but they had the footwork. They were willing to do this day in, day out. When I didn't feel like doing it and I was like, yeah, I'll just do an all-nighter and knock it out, they had it worked out already. And so I had to work twice as hard to be able to do what they were just doing a little bit every single day. So that would be the number one thing I wish I had learned sooner, because I don't know, I might be president or something. I'm not sure. But yeah.
The time's not up yet.
There's still time.
I'm gonna throw an extra bonus question in.
Okay.
Name a person that's had a huge impact on you.
Ooh, wow, so many. I will say most recently, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Stanley L. So this was somebody who I met him through my girlfriend's mom, right? So my girlfriend's mother is a mentor of sorts. So she was the chairperson of NAACP AXO, which is like a student run like competition, right? In technology, the arts, all these things. She knew this guy, and he sort of mentored folks who are in the entrepreneurship category. And they're like, hey, you should meet him. Cool. Met him. And it turns out he was somebody who was like me 40 years down the line. Right. So he had started sort of similarly to what I did. He sort of stumbled into it, had scaled it all the way up to working with Fortune 500 companies, and really was one of the first people to like sit down and look at me and say, look, you can build this. You do not need to look like this to make it happen. You do not need to do what this company does to be able to scale it. Be you, deliver value every time, and you can make it happen. So I owe a lot of who I am today to how he sort of approached his everyday life, not just business.
Stephon, Braithwaite, Martin, you have dropped some gems and some jewels as we expected you to. I'm going to connect with you offline because I need to get access to some of that capital for me and our clients. Yeah. Tell people if they're looking for a management consultant, tell them where they can find you.
Absolutely. So you can find us at rhetoricadvising.com. That's our website there. So RHETORIC advising.com. You can find me on Instagram at Steph, so STEPH, Mart, MART _CEO. I drop business tips, day-to-day advice. Sometimes I'll drop an outfit on there. But I really believe in investing in folks and helping them scale and grow. You can also find me on LinkedIn at my name, Stephon Braithwaite Martin. I'm going to be dropping a lot of information on there as well. So there's a tons of different ways to connect with me. Hope to work with some of you guys soon. I'm really excited and I'm really passionate about building not only just businesses, but Black-owned businesses. I think it's super important that we become, we continue to be direct stakeholders in our future. And I love being able to do that. So, yeah, thank you guys.
Right on, brother. Right on. Great. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
And as you know, we are the Biz Breaks Podcast, where we have real talk with real entrepreneurs. We see us every Wednesday on all of our social media platforms, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stephon, we're going to definitely have you back on again in the nearest future. Stay tuned, and anybody wants to connect with you, they heard, and we'll post on the platforms where they can connect with you. Thank you, my friend.
Look forward to it.
Nykeia Neal, it's been a pleasure as always.